My husband told me, "Evelyn, you'd be helpless without me." He didn't yell it. He said it in that calm, patient voice he always used when I'd asked about the finances, the voice he used when he was explaining something complicated. He said it like he was telling me the sky was blue, a simple, undeniable fact. Now, I live a life that's beyond his luxury level. But to understand how I got here, you have to understand where I was on that Tuesday in October. The room was cold, not just the air conditioning, but the feel of it. Everything was polished to a cold shine. The long mahogany table, the leather chairs that sighed when you moved, the heavy, expensive pen they gave me to sign my life away. Richard sat across from me, my husband of 45 years. He sat next to his attorney, Mark. I'd known Mark for 20 years. He and Richard played golf at the club. I'd served them iced tea on my patio. Now, Mark wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept shuffling papers and talking about amicable dissolution. There was nothing amicable about it. Richard just looked bored, impatient, like he was waiting for a tea time, and I was holding him up. Mark slid a thick stack of papers across the table. "As you can see, Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth, "Richard is being extremely generous." Generous. That was the word they used. "You keep the house in Highland Park," he continued. "Fully paid off, of course. And the alimony, well, it's more than generous. It's security for life." Security. I thought about that word. He made it sound like I was a pet being moved to a new, comfortable kennel. I looked at Richard. He was checking his watch. 45 years. 45 years of raising our 2 children in that house. 45 years of hosting his partners, his clients, managing the staff, planning the dinners, and sitting beside him at banquets, smiling until my face hurt. All of it, my entire life's work, was reduced to security. My voice felt rusty. What about the portfolio? Mark stiffened. Richard actually let out a sigh, a little puff of air, as if I brought up something distasteful. "Evelyn," Richard said, cutting his lawyer off. He used that patient voice again. "The portfolio is business. It's complicated. It's tied up in assets you wouldn't understand. The tax implications alone. I understand that we built it together," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the hum of the air conditioner. I remember in 1985, when we bought that first tech stock. My father suggested it. I was the one who tracked it in my journal for the first 10 years. Richard actually smiled. He looked at Mark, a little see what I have to deal with kind of smile. "Evelyn, please," he said, his voice laced with pity. "Don't make this difficult. This is all handled. It's done. You're being taken care of." That's when he leaned forward, putting his hands flat on that polished table. "You'd be helpless without me, Evelyn. You don't have the faintest idea how the real world works." There it was. The thing he probably thought for decades, finally said out loud. The air in the office was absolute. Even Mark looked down at his papers. The room smelled like expensive leather and floor wax. Helpless. All the times I'd balanced the household books to the penny, managed the repairs, the investments for the kids' college funds. All of it was just a game to him. I was a child playing in the fake world. He was the one who worked in the real world. My hand was trembling. I won't lie about that. I felt the heat rise in my face, the sting of pure humiliation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him who really reminded him to pull his money out before the 2008 crash. I wanted to throw that heavy, expensive pen right at his smug face. But I didn't. I just listened. I let the word land. Helpless. I looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in 20 years. I saw a man who didn't know me at all. He had been my partner for nearly half a century, and he thought I was an invalid. And in that cold, quiet, devastating moment. A strange calm settled over me. The trembling in my hand didn't stop, but it wasn't just fear anymore. It was something else. He thought the settlement was my entire world. He thought that by giving me the house and the alimony, he was giving me everything I could possibly manage. He had no idea what I was capable of. He had forgotten who I was before I met him. He had forgotten who my father was. But in that moment, I remembered. That's when the clarity came. He wasn't sentencing me to a life of helpless security. He was handing me my freedom. He just didn't know it. I picked up the pen. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just signed my name on every line Mark pointed to. I didn't argue. I just listened. And I remembered. I remembered every single word. Helpless. I let that word echo in my head. I let it burn, because I knew I was going to need it. When I got back to the house, the silence was the first thing that hit me. It was so complete, so heavy, it felt like the walls were holding their breath. Richard's things were already gone. His closet was cleared out. His study, the one I was never supposed to bother him in, was just a room with a desk. He'd moved out weeks before to a downtown apartment, or I assumed to her apartment. It didn't matter. He was gone. The first morning was the hardest. I woke up at 6, just like I had for 45 years. My body just did it. I went to the kitchen to make coffee, and I automatically reached for 2 mugs from the cupboard. His favorite one, the heavy blue one, was still there. I stood there holding it, the porcelain cold in my hand. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at it. Finally, I put it back on the shelf. That one simple act felt more final than signing the papers. I made 1 cup of coffee and sat at the breakfast nook, overlooking the patio I'd spent 20 years landscaping. The newspaper was on the driveway. I didn't get it. I just sat and waited. I was waiting for the sound of his shower, the sound of his footsteps coming down the stairs, the sound of him clearing his throat. I was waiting for him to ask me where his favorite golf shirt was. The only sound was the ticking of the clock over the stove. It was a loud, hollow sound in the empty room. My life had been a complex schedule of other people's needs. Managing the house, managing the social calendar, managing the kids' lives, and managing Richard's. Now, there was nothing to manage. The house stayed clean. The calendar was blank. I'd walk into the dining room, and the long, polished table I had set for hundreds of dinner parties just sat there, gathering a thin layer of dust. I'd make the bed, and I'd wonder why I bothered. I stopped cooking. Cooking, for one, is just organizing leftovers. I ate a lot of toast, standing over the counter. I felt like a ghost in my own home. The friends I'd had for decades, the women from the country club, my tennis partners, they called at first. Evelyn, honey, I am just sick about this. He's a fool. Evelyn, you're so much better off, you know? Evelyn, we must do lunch. The lunches never happened. After the first week, the texts became awkward. Then they stopped. I wasn't part of a couple anymore. I was the divorced one. I was the one who got left for a younger woman. I was a social problem they didn't know how to solve. I saw Beth, my tennis partner of 20 years, at the grocery store. We locked eyes over the produce. I saw the panic on her face. She gave me a little, tight-lipped wave, and then she quickly turned her cart and hurried toward the bakery. She ran from me. That's when it truly hit me. I wasn't just alone. I was invisible. I was a lifetime of service, and now that the service was no longer required, I just disappeared. My kids called. My son from Chicago, my daughter from Austin. How are you, Mom? Really? Are you okay? What could I say? Could I tell my daughter, who was busy with her own 2 small children, that I sometimes sat in the dark for an hour because I couldn't find the energy to turn on a lamp? Could I tell my son, who was up for a big promotion, that I felt so lonely I couldn't breathe? No, you don't do that. You're a mother. So you lie. I'm fine, honey. Just busy, getting things organized. Busy. That was the biggest lie of all. My days were empty canyons. One evening, weeks later, I was in the kitchen. I couldn't even stand to eat at the table, so I was just sitting on a stool at the island. I was looking for a pen to write a grocery list just to have something to do the next day. I opened a utility drawer, the one full of old warranties and takeout menus. Underneath a stack of recipes, I saw it. It was a simple spiral-bound notebook, faded blue. My father had given it to me when I was in college. Numbers don't lie, Evie, he'd said. They just need patience. Write it down. My old stock notebook. I pulled it out. The pages were soft, the ink faded. My own handwriting from 1983, notes on companies that didn't even exist anymore. And then my notes from the 90s, the ones about that little tech company Richard had laughed at. I had tracked it. I had been right. I sat there in the quiet, dark kitchen, and I turned the pages. It felt like me. It was a part of me I had packed away and forgotten about. Richard had always called it my little hobby, my monopoly money. The house was just as empty. The ache of invisibility was still there. But holding that notebook, I felt something else. It was small, and it was buried deep, but it was there. It was a thread. That notebook became my only companion. I didn't open the TV. I didn't read the paper. I just sat, and I read my own notes. I read my own logic, and I started to remember the person I was before I became Richard's wife. That old notebook, it felt heavy in my hands, heavier than it should have. I sat there in the silent kitchen, turning those soft, worn pages, my handwriting from 1983, and I remembered my father was not a wealthy man, not like Richard. He was an engineer, a man of numbers and quiet logic. Every Sunday, he'd spread the newspaper out on the dining table, and he'd tap the business section. "Come here, Evie," he'd say. I was only 16, more interested in movie stars than stocks. But he was patient. He'd point to the columns of tiny numbers. "You see this, honey? This isn't just a company. It's a story. And these numbers tell you if the story is true." He taught me how to read the financial pages, how to spot a trend, how to look for value, not just flash. He bought me that notebook. "Don't guess," he told me. "Write it down. Do the math. Numbers don't lie, Evie. They just need patience." I kept that notebook all through college, and even after I married Richard. In the early years, I'd bring him ideas. "Richard," I'd say, "I've been watching this little company in California. They're making personal computers. I think it could be something." He'd pat my hand. "That's nice, dear. Don't you worry your head about it." A few years later, at a dinner party, I heard him telling our friends about his new investment in that same company. I just stood there, holding a tray of appetizers, and I didn't say a word. I stopped bringing him ideas, but I never stopped writing in the notebook. It became my own private world. I'll never forget the last time he saw it. It was about 10 years ago. We were having guests over, some of his new, young partners from the firm. I'd left the notebook on the desk in the study. Richard picked it up, laughing. He held it up for everyone to see. "You all want to see Evelyn's secret? This is her Monopoly money book," he announced. "She keeps track of all the imaginary money she's making." I can still feel the heat in my face. The men chuckled politely. One of the young wives gave me a pitying look. He handed it back to me. "It's cute, Evelyn. A cute little hobby." A hobby. That's all it ever was to him. He never asked to see the numbers. He never asked that I had outperformed his own managed portfolio 3 out of the last 5 years. It was just cute. Sitting there in the kitchen, that night, I held that notebook. I thought of my father's words, "Numbers don't lie." And I thought of Richard's, "You'd be helpless without me." I closed the notebook. I walked to the study, his study, which was now just a room, and I sat at the desk. I opened my laptop. It took me a few minutes to wipe the dust off it. I'd only ever used it for emails and recipes. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was an electric feeling. I typed, "Open a new brokerage account," into the search bar. It was all so different. There were no men in suits, no heavy mahogany tables, just a website with bright colors asking me for my social security number. It took me an hour. I had to scan my driver's license, answer questions about my risk tolerance. I felt a little surge of dark humor. My risk tolerance? I just risked 45 years on one man. This was nothing. Finally, the screen lit up. "Congratulations, Evelyn. Your account is open." And then the next screen, "Fund your account." I logged into my new bank account, the one with just my name on it. I looked at the numbers sitting there. It was the alimony, the entire settlement, everything he had left me. It was every penny of the security he insisted I needed. My hand hovered over the mouse. A part of me, a very loud, very sensible part, screamed at me, "What are you doing? You are 68 years old. That is your safety net. Put it in a CD. Put it in a savings account. Don't you dare touch it." It was the voice of reason. It was the voice that had told me to be quiet, to be safe for 45 years. If I lost this, there was no one to call. There was no Richard. I would be destitute. I would be helpless. But then, a quieter voice. My father's. "Numbers don't lie. Evie, they just need patience." Richard thought he'd left me a cage. He called it security. He thought I'd just sit in it, safe and helpless, until I died. But what I was looking at, it wasn't a cage. It was a key. I took a breath. I thought about him laughing at my notebook. Monopoly money. I typed in the number, the whole number, every last cent. I clicked transfer. The screen showed a little spinning wheel. And then, "Your funds will be available for trading in 2 business days." I closed the laptop. The house was just as quiet. I was just as alone. But for the first time in 30 years, I wasn't waiting for my life to happen. I had just made my first decision. It was terrifying, and it was mine. 2 business days later, the money was there. It just sat in the account, a big, terrifying number next to the word available. I stared at it. That was it. That was my security for life. And I, a 68-year-old woman who had just figured out how to use a laptop, was about to gamble it on the stock market. Richard's voice was so clear in my head. "You'd be helpless, Evelyn." I opened the trading platform. It was nothing like my father's newspaper. It was an assault, a flashing, blinking chaos of numbers, of red and green arrows going up and down, of charts that looked like mountain ranges. There were tickers scrolling by so fast I couldn't read them. Words I'd never heard of. ETFs, options, crypto. I was completely, utterly overwhelmed. I felt like I had stepped off a quiet country road and onto the middle of a 6-lane highway. So I did the only thing I could. I started to study, day and night. My kitchen island was covered in notebooks. I turned to YouTube. Evelyn Barnes, sat there for hours, taking notes from a young man in his 20s with bright blue hair who was talking about bullish divergence. He talked so fast. I had to pause the video every 10 seconds just to write down what he said. I signed up for a free Zoom webinar. When the screen lit up, it was a grid of faces. They were all young. They looked like my children, like my son's friends. I was the only one with gray hair, sitting there in my quiet, empty house. They all talked in this rapid-fire shorthand. This code. I felt that old sting of invisibility, that feeling of being the old woman in the corner that no one bothers with. But this time, it was different. I didn't want them to notice me. I just wanted to listen. After a week, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just stare at the money. So I started small. I bought a few shares of a company I knew, a big department store I'd shopped at my whole life. It felt safe. I didn't do much research. I just bought it. I checked it the next day. It was down $50. The day after, it was down $200. By the end of the week, I had lost $500. My stomach just sank. $500. I could have bought groceries for a month with that. I could have had the gardener replant the azaleas. I felt sick. Richard's voice came roaring back. You don't have the faintest idea how the real world works. He was right. I was a fool. An old, foolish woman playing a game. She didn't understand. I was gambling with my entire future. The panic was so cold, so complete. I almost did it. I almost hit the button to sell everything, to pull the money out and hide it in a CD where it belonged. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking again, just like they had in the lawyer's office. I walked into the kitchen and saw my father's old faded blue notebook sitting on the counter. I picked it up. His handwriting. Numbers don't lie, Evie. They just need patience. I took a deep breath. I was not a gambler. My father wasn't a gambler. He was an engineer. I started over. I turned off the YouTube videos of the fast-talking boys. I ignored the hot stock tips flashing on the screen. I went back to basics. I spent 2 solid weeks just reading, not watching, reading. I read quarterly reports. I read industry forecasts. I looked for the story behind the numbers, just like my father had taught me. I ignored the sectors I didn't understand, the crypto, the strange tech startups. I focused on what I knew. Healthcare. I'd spent decades managing my family's health. And renewable energy. I knew the world was changing. I found a company. It wasn't flashy. It was a medical device company out of Minnesota. They had a new patent for a heart valve. It wasn't a hot stock, but I read their reports. I read their competitors' reports. I looked at their debt. I looked at their leadership, and I saw a story, a true story of steady growth. It wasn't a guess. It was a thesis. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was the real test. I sold the department store stock. I just took the loss. I ate it. And then I typed in the number, $10,000. I put it all on this one quiet, boring company. I clicked buy. And then I walked away. I forced myself not to look at it every 5 minutes. Patience, Evie. I waited a whole week. It was the longest week of my life. On Tuesday morning, I made my coffee. I sat down at the desk. I opened the laptop. I logged in. I looked at the number. The stock was up. It was up 15%. I had made $1,500. I just stared at the screen. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the number. It was the proof. My logic was sound. My research was good. My father's rules still worked. I did it. Evelyn Barnes, had done it. Richard was wrong. I wasn't helpless. I was competent. I closed the laptop. I took my coffee, and I went out to the patio. The morning air was cool. The silence of the house was still there, but it wasn't lonely anymore. It felt clear. I felt for the first time in so many years completely and truly alive. That first win, that $1,500, it was a wonderful feeling. But I was smart enough to know that one win could just be luck. The real test wasn't if I could win once. It was if I could build a system. My father was an engineer. He built bridges, things that lasted. He didn't just get lucky. I had to do the same. I didn't want to be a gambler. I wanted to be an investor. So my life found a new rhythm. The silence in that big house wasn't empty anymore. It was focused. I was up at 7 every morning. I'd make my coffee, and I'd sit at my desk. No, not Richard's old desk. I'd moved it out. I bought a new, simple one. My desk. My days became a routine. Coffee, laptop, and the numbers. I wasn't just guessing anymore. I was building a system just like my father taught me. I spread the money out. Diversify, Evie, he'd always said. Never put all your eggs in one basket. I put some money into real estate funds. Not buying buildings, but investing in the funds that own them. I put more into that green energy sector. That just felt right. It felt like the future. I found a company in Arizona that was making more efficient solar panels. I spent 3 full days just reading their quarterly reports, their leadership bios, their long-term plans. The numbers were solid. The story was true. So I bought in. Then I researched a tech company. Not a flashy one, but a boring one that managed data storage. It wasn't a thrilling gamble. It was quiet, methodical work. It felt like tending my patio garden. You weed, you water, you prune, and you trust the process. I wasn't perfect. Oh, I made mistakes. I got cocky. There was one tech stock. Everyone on the financial news was raving about it. It was the next big thing. I got caught up in the excitement. I felt that itch, that I'm missing out feeling. I bought a significant position, more than I should have, without doing my own deep research. I was following the crowd. 2 days later, they released a terrible earnings report. The stock dropped 30% in an hour. I lost more than I care to admit. In just a few minutes, the floor just fell out of my stomach. That old, cold panic came right back. Helpless, helpless. I could hear Richard's voice, but this time something new came right after the panic. I was angry, furious, at myself. I had broken my own rule. I'd listened to the noise, not the numbers. I sold it immediately. I took the loss. It was an expensive lesson, but I learned it. I wrote it in my faded blue notebook, right under a note from 1987. I am not a gambler. I am an investor. Stick to the system. And I did. Month after month, my account grew. Steadily. The green energy stock did well. The medical device company was solid. The boring data company was a rock. After about 6 months, I looked at the number on the screen. It was bigger than my original alimony. I had made it all back. And then some. I was safe. But a funny thing happened. I realized the money wasn't the point anymore. I had security, but I didn't have a purpose. What was this all for? I thought about that feeling in the lawyer's office, that raw humiliation. I thought about all the women like me who'd been patted on the head and told, "Don't you worry your pretty head about it." I thought about what a difference it would have made if I'd had this knowledge, this power 30 years ago. So I did something. I opened another account, a private one. I called it the E. Barnes Foundation. E for Evelyn, E for Evie. It was completely anonymous. I found a small nonprofit that specialized in financial literacy for older women, women who were widowed or divorced, women who were starting over with nothing. I made my first donation. It was a small amount, but it felt more real than any stock trade. It felt like planting a tree. About a week later, I had to go to the country club to pick up a final piece of paperwork. I hadn't been inside in months. As I was walking out, I heard Susan and Carol, 2 women I'd played bridge with for 20 years. They were at a table, their voices low and sharp. "Can you believe it?" Susan was saying. "He looks terrible. She's half his age and spending him into the ground." I heard his partners at the firm are furious. Something about his reputation. Carol said, "Well, what did he expect? He threw away a diamond." They didn't see me. I just kept walking. I got in my car. I sat there for a moment, and I expected to feel something, a little bit of victory, a little bit of sadness. I felt nothing. It was like hearing gossip about a stranger. It had nothing to do with me. I had to get home. I had quarterly reports to review. My world wasn't that big, silent house anymore. It was my desk, my notebooks, and the small anonymous thank you email from the literacy program. The more my portfolio grew, the more I gave. And the more I gave, the lighter I felt. My old life had been about luxury. This new life, this was about peace. I was building my own foundation, one that Richard couldn't see, couldn't touch, and couldn't ever laugh at. For a year, my life was a quiet routine. Coffee, research, trades, donations, repeat. It was steady. I wasn't trying to get rich quick. I was just building. I was tending my garden. My account grew, my foundation account grew, and I found a rhythm that felt like my own. Then, one Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was at my desk, like always. I logged into my account, and I just blinked. I thought the website was broken. I must have been seeing an extra zero. The number on the screen, the one that said total account value, was so much bigger than it had been the night before that it didn't seem real. It had to be a glitch. I looked down at my individual holdings, and I saw it. The Arizona Solar Panel Company. It was bright green. The numbers next to it were flashing so fast. It was up, not 5%, not 10%. It was up 45%. Overnight, my hands fumbled on the keyboard. I opened a new window and typed in the company's name. It was the lead story on every financial site. Breakthrough in solar efficiency. Massive government contracts awarded. A new era in renewable energy. I had done the research. I had read their reports. I saw their potential. I thought they were a good, solid 5-year investment. I never, in my wildest dreams, expected this. My thesis, it wasn't just right. It was explosive. I sat there, staring at the screen. The amount of money was staggering. It was more money than Richard had ever let me see. And then, for the first time in over a year, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Barnes," a man's voice said. He sounded young, professional. "This is Evelyn Barnes." "Mrs. Barnes, this is Lucas Miller from the brokerage firm. I'm your account representative." I remembered his name from the setup emails. He'd never called me before. "Yes, Lucas." There was a pause on the line. He sounded nervous. "Mrs. Barnes, I'm just calling to personally congratulate you. Your position in that solar company. Frankly, it's the talk of the office this morning. That was an extraordinary move. Absolutely extraordinary." I felt a small, strange smile form on my face. A move. He called it a move. Not a hobby. Not a guess. "Thank you, Lucas," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "I liked their numbers." He actually laughed, a quick, respectful sound. "You and everyone else now. But you saw it months ago. Look, Mrs. Barnes, the real reason I'm calling my firm, we host a private investor summit every year. It's in New York City. It's for our highest value clients, people who are managing significant portfolios. I think you belong in that room. I'd like to formally invite you. New York City, the real world, the place Richard always flew to for his important meetings. The place I was never invited, the place I supposedly wouldn't understand. When is it?" I asked. "Next month. We fly you out, of course. All expenses covered." "Yes, Lucas, I said, looking out at my quiet patio. I think I would be interested. Please send me the details. I hung up the phone. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was buzzing. The world, the real world, had just called me. It had called me Mrs. Barnes and treated me like a professional. A few days later, the phone rang again. This time, I knew the number. My stomach did a quick, familiar flip. That old, cold reflex. It was Richard. He hadn't called me directly in almost a year. We used lawyers. I let it ring twice. I took a breath. I picked up. Hello, Richard. My voice was clear. No tremor. No anger. Just clear. Evelyn. Hello. Hi. He sounded off. He was stammering. Richard never stammered. He was the most confident, patronizing man I had ever known. I was just calling about, the tax paperwork. I said nothing. I just waited. The silence stretched. He was the one filling it. Yes, he continued. The accountant, he sent over some forms about the assets. The split. It's all very complicated. Complicated. His word. The word he used to end conversations. The word he used to make me feel small. Is there a question about the forms? Richard? I asked. My tone was polite, professional, as if I were talking to, a banker. Oh, no, not a question, exactly. I just wanted to make sure you got them, that you understood them. It's a lot to handle. He was trying to be helpful. He was trying to get his footing back. I understood them perfectly. Richard, I've already sent them to my own accountant. There was a dead, flat silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. My own accountant. 2 words. That's all it took. Oh, he said. His voice was small. Oh, you have your own accountant now. Right. Good. That's good. He had heard. I knew it instantly. The news of the solar stock, the kind of money that explodes. It's not a secret for long. He had heard. He wasn't calling about taxes. He was calling to see if it was true. Was there anything else? I asked. No, Evelyn. That's all. Goodbye, Richard. I hung up the phone. I didn't slam it. I didn't sigh. I just placed it back in the cradle. The voice that had defined my life. The voice that had told me I was helpless. The voice that could make me feel small and stupid with just a tone. It was just a man on the phone, stammering about paperwork. The reversal was complete. The silence wasn't in my house anymore. It was on his end of the line. I looked at the email from Lucas. New York City Investor Summit. I had a plane to catch. I went to New York. I packed my best 2 suits, the ones I'd only ever worn to weddings and funerals, and I got on that plane. The city was a lot. It was loud and fast and smelled like diesel and hot pretzels. For the first hour, I felt small again. I felt like the woman from Dallas who had no business being there. But the next morning, I walked into that summit. It was in a glass ballroom overlooking the city. It was a room full of men in expensive, dark suits. They all looked just like Richard. They all had that same impatient, real-world energy. Lucas, the young banker, met me at the door. He didn't treat me like an old woman. He treated me like a client. He treated me like I mattered. He walked me into that room, and I saw them turn and look. Evelyn, he said, this is Mark, this is David, this is Evelyn Barnes. She's the one who saw the solar move 6 months out. The men didn't pat my hand. They didn't smile at me politely. They looked at me. They shook my hand. They asked me questions. What metrics were you tracking? What's your read on the energy sector now? I just told them the truth. I told them what my father taught me. I don't watch the noise. I said, I read the numbers. The story is always in the numbers. I didn't talk a lot. I'm not a loud person. I just listened, and when I did speak, I said what I knew. I felt solid. I wasn't Richard's wife. I wasn't a hostess. I was an investor. I belonged in that room. At lunch, Lucas introduced me to a journalist, a sharp, smart-looking woman about my daughter's age. "This is Annabelle," he said. "She's with Forbes. She's writing a piece on new investment voices." Annabelle and I talked for 20 minutes. She asked about my strategy. I just told her my story. I told her about my father and the notebook and how numbers tell a story. I thought nothing of it. A few weeks later, her assistant called. They wanted to do a full feature. A photographer, a very nice young man, came to my house in Dallas. He didn't want pictures of me on the patio. He wanted me at my desk with my laptop and my father's faded blue notebook open right next to it. I didn't hear from them again for a month. Then, one morning, my phone rang. It was my son from Chicago. His voice was so strange. Mom, have you been to a grocery store this morning?" "No, honey, why?" "Just go to a bookstore. Call me back." I drove to the local Barnes and Noble. I walked in, and there, on the main wall of new magazines, I saw it, and I just had to stop. It was Forbes, the cover of Forbes, and it was me. It wasn't a glamour shot. I was just me, Evelyn Barnes, 69 years old. I was sitting at my desk, looking right at the camera. I wasn't smiling a big, fake smile. It was just a small, calm, confident expression. And the headline, in huge white letters right across my chest: "The Quiet Lioness of Wall Street, the investor who outsmarted corporate giants." I bought 5 copies. I sat in my car in the parking lot, just holding one. The Quiet Lioness. I had to laugh. I had never been a lioness. I was just Evie. The story of what happened next, my old friend Janet told me. She was still a member at the country club. She called me absolutely giddy. Richard, she said, was in the men's grill, right where he always was, having lunch with his partners. Mark, his lawyer, was there. All of them. Someone, one of the other members, walked in, holding the magazine. He tossed it right on Richard's table. "Hey, Richard," the man said, "isn't this your Evelyn?" Janet said the whole room went still. Richard picked it up. He looked at the cover, and his face, she said, it just froze. All the color drained out of it. He just stared at my picture. His friends, his partners, they all leaned in. They were reading the headline out loud. "The Quiet Lioness outsmarted corporate giants." Janet said one of his golf buddies, a man who'd known us for 30 years, just looked at the cover, then at Richard, and he said, "Helpless? Huh, Richard?" Looks like she knew exactly how the real world works. Richard didn't say a word. He didn't yell. He didn't make an excuse. He just dropped the magazine. He stood up so fast his chair almost fell over, and he walked out of the grill. He just left his friends his half-eaten lunch. All of it. He just walked out. My phone was quiet all day. My children called, crying and laughing. Lucas called, ecstatic. But from Richard, nothing. Until that evening. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text message. From him. I looked at it for a long time. Just 5 words. "You've done well for yourself." That was it. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Not, "Congratulations." Just, "You've done well for yourself." It was still him. Still the man who had to be the judge. The one who hands out the approval. I sat there looking at that text. I thought of all the things I could say. I thought of a dozen sharp, angry, bitter things. I could have told him what Janet saw at the club. I could have sent him a picture of my account balance. I could have told him just how small he'd made me feel. but that would have been his kind of victory. Loud and bitter. I wanted my kind of victory. Quiet and true. My fingers typed one single sentence. I read it back. It was the truth. It was the only thing left to say. I always could. You just never noticed. I hit send, and I felt the last, final thread break. I was free. I put the phone down after I sent that text. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't even look to see if he read it. It didn't matter. It was finished. That was a year ago. I'm not in Dallas anymore. I sold the house. The big, silent, empty house in Highland Park. It was full of ghosts. It was full of the woman I used to be, the woman who waited, the woman who was invisible. I sold everything in it. The big mahogany dining table I had polished for 40 years. The patio furniture I'd bought for parties I never wanted to host. The heavy, formal drapes. I just let it all go. I kept 3 things: my father's faded blue notebook, a box of old photographs, and the clothes I was wearing. Today, I'm standing by a window. It's a very different view. I'm in New York City, the city I was once told I wouldn't understand. I live in an apartment high above the city, a place they call a penthouse. I know what that word sounds like. Penthouse. It sounds like Richard. It sounds like his kind of life, his level of luxury. I've been in his kind of luxury. It's all cold marble and glass tables and art on the walls that no one is allowed to touch. It's big and it's empty and it's cold. My home is nothing like that. Yes, the view is vast. I can see the river and the bridges and the entire city moving like a river of light. But my apartment, it's small. It's cozy. And it's full of me. The first thing I did when I moved in was buy plants. Dozens of them. They're everywhere. They're hanging from the ceiling. They're sitting on the windowsills. They're climbing the bookshelves. They're alive, and they're a little messy, and they make the air feel good. My desk, the simple one I bought for myself, sits right by this window. It's not an executive's desk. It's a work desk. It's covered in notebooks and a laptop and pens. And on that desk, there are 2 things that I look at every single day. One is a framed photograph of my father. He's young in the picture, maybe 30. He's in his shirt sleeves, leaning over a blueprint, holding a slide rule. He's smiling. I look at him every morning, and I say, "Well, Dad, we did it." The other thing on my desk is a simple woven basket. It's overflowing with letters. These letters, they're not from bankers. They're not from CEOs. They're from the E. Barnes Foundation. My foundation, it's not a secret pseudonym anymore. After the Forbes article, I put my name on it. And I funded it. Really funded it. The letters are from women. I pulled one out just this morning. It's from a woman in Ohio, 72 years old. Her husband passed away, and she had no idea how to manage their pension. She was terrified. She used a grant from my foundation to take a basic computer class. She wrote, "Dear Mrs. Barnes, I was so scared. But I did it. I'm not scared of the bank's website anymore. I can pay my own bills." Another one is from a woman in Florida, 65, newly divorced. She took one of our financial literacy courses. "My husband always told me I was bad with money," she wrote. "Turns out I'm pretty good at it." I read every single one. These are my real quarterly reports. This is my real portfolio. Richard's luxury level was always about what other people thought. Big houses, new cars, a younger wife, a reputation at the club. It was all about being seen in a certain way. My luxury, it's about peace. It's the luxury of waking up in the morning and knowing my day belongs to me. It's the luxury of making my own coffee, sitting at my own desk in my bathrobe, and doing work that I know for a fact is changing someone's life. It's the quiet, simple, powerful luxury of knowing my own worth. I don't need a magazine to tell me I'm a lioness. I'm just Evie, I'm an investor. I'm a philanthropist. I'm a woman who, at 69 years old, finally got to meet herself. He thought I needed him to survive. He thought his money, his house, his security was my entire life. He thought that without him, I would just stop. All I ever needed was to believe I could. I just needed to remember the person I was before he told me who I was supposed to be. I look at these letters from all these women who were told the same things, that they weren't smart enough or strong enough or capable enough, women who were made to feel invisible. And I have to ask, how many of us were told we'd be helpless and still prove them wrong? I still work. I still manage my portfolio, and I still run my foundation. But the work feels different now. It's not a fight anymore. It's a purpose. Last month, I took a trip, not to a big investor summit or a flashy vacation spot. I went to a small town in Ohio, the kind of place with one main street and a hardware store that's been there for 100 years. It was my father's hometown. I wasn't Evelyn Barnes, the quiet lioness. I was just a woman in a comfortable sweater and a warm coat. I walked down the street where he grew up. I had a cup of coffee in the same diner he used to talk about. I went to the local library. It was a small brick building, the kind that smells like old paper and floor wax. I remembered my father telling me this was where he learned about the world. I spoke to the librarian, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable. I told her I was in town visiting family roots, and I'd like to make a donation in my father's name. A quiet one, just for them. We talked for a while, and I mentioned my foundation's work. She got excited. We've just been able to expand our youth and community section thanks to a grant, she said, from that E. Barnes Foundation. It's wonderful. I just smiled. That's lovely to hear. I made my personal donation, and as I was getting ready to leave, a young girl, maybe 13 or 14, came in. She was all arms and legs with a big backpack. She went right to that new community section. I watched from the doorway as she pulled a book from the shelf. It was a small, colorful paperback. I could read the title from where I stood, A Beginner's Guide to Investing. She sat down at one of the old wooden tables, opened it up, and started to read. My father, the engineer, taught me. I, the helpless wife, taught myself. And now, in a small library in Ohio, a girl I will never meet is learning from a book my foundation funded. The cycle continues. The knowledge gets passed down. I walked out into the cool afternoon air. I thought about my father's simple, patient logic. I thought about Richard's loud, dismissive confidence. I thought about all the years I spent being quiet, being invisible, being dismissed. I realized, finally, that he had been right about one thing. I was helpless for a while, not because I wasn't capable, but because I had confused his voice with my own. The greatest investment I ever made wasn't in solar panels or tech stocks. It was in that one terrifying, debatable decision to transfer my alimony. It was the moment I bet on myself. I'm standing at my father's grave now. It's a simple headstone. I just came to say thank you. As I leave, I write one last line in my journal. It's the final lesson, the one it took me 69 years to truly learn. Never confuse silence with weakness. Thank you for watching. If Evelyn's journey spoke to you, or if you've ever felt underestimated, please let us know in the comments. Your story matters. Please help us share these messages by liking this video and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more stories of reinvention and empowerment, please subscribe to the channel. We have so much more to share with you.